$82.7 billion. That's what Netflix just agreed to pay for Warner Brothers. Not a partnership, not a licensing deal, a full-on acquisition. HBO? Well, Netflix owns it now. DC Comics, Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman? All Netflix. Harry Potter, Game of Thrones, The Sopranos, Friends, Casablanca, The Wizard of Oz? Netflix, 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 and yeah, Netflix. 102 years of Hollywood history swallowed whole by a streaming app that started by mailing DVDs to your house. And here's the kicker. Just a few weeks ago, Netflix publicly denied they had any interest in buying Warner Brothers. Lying liars go to lie, I guess. Now Netflix is trying to buy one of the last great Hollywood studios for over $80 billion, turn it into a content farm for the algorithm, and in the process, they might reshape or straight up destroy the modern entertainment industry. Politicians are screaming antitrust, producers are writing anonymous panic letters, theater owners are predicting an extinction event, and somewhere David Zaslav is measuring his swimming pool for gold plating. I'm the Critical Nerd, and today I'm breaking down how we got here, what Netflix is actually buying, why Hollywood is freaking out, and whether regulators will kill this thing. Also, what this deal really means for you and me as fans. All right, everyone, welcome back to the Critical Nerd, where we talk box office, corporate insanity, and why every classic franchise eventually ends up as a bullet point in a PowerPoint deck. If you're new here, welcome to the madness. If you're returning, you already know the drill. Grab a drink, grab a snack, and maybe grab a stress ball, because Hollywood has lost its entire mind. Today, we're diving into the Netflix Warner Brothers Discovery mega deal. An $82.7 billion corporate kaiju fight that put Warner Brothers Pictures, HBO Max, DC Studios, Warner Brothers Television and Animation, and WB Games, and one of the deepest film and TV libraries on Earth, under the same roof as the company that cancels your favorite show after 2 seasons because the algorithm felt emotionally distant. If you like seeing these clown car decisions broken down without the corporate PR gloss, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next chapter in Hollywood's self-destruct saga. Let's start with how we got here. So just how do you go from Warner Brothers, the studio that built Hollywood, to press F to pay respects, we sold it to a streaming app? Short answer: terrible mergers, mountains of debt, and executives who treat movie studios like disposable side quests. First, you have the AT&T and Discovery hangover. First, AT&T bought Time Warner because someone in a boardroom decided, we're a tech company now, let's own content. Then they realized, wow, running a movie studio is hard when you know nothing about movies. Shocking, I know. So AT&T bailed, spun Warner Media into a merger with Discovery, and we got the modern beast, Warner Brothers Discovery, led by David Delete It for a Tax Write-Off Zaslav. He looked at HBO Max and said, our problem is there's too much good stuff on here, clearly. Shows got canceled, movies got shelved, Batgirl got Thanos snapped for a tax write-off. And somewhere in that chaos, they decided to brand HBO Max was just too understandable, I think. So they rebranded it to Max, because when your house is on fire, obviously you repaint the mailbox. Warner Brothers Discovery came out of that merger absolutely loaded with debt. Tens of billions of dollars. The stock tanked. Or I should say tanked. The streaming growth wasn't living up to the fairy tales they sold Wall Street. Theatrical performance was all over the place. So what do you do when you're over-leveraged your media empire and you're out of ideas? Well, you break it in half and hope someone richer than you shows up. Enter the Grand's plan. Yeah, split WBD into 2 companies. Warner Brothers, streaming and studios, all the sexy stuff. Like WB Pictures, New Line Entertainment, HBO Max, DC Studios, WB TV, WB Animation, WB Games, and some international sports assets. Discovery Global? Well, that's the less sexy but still cash flowing stuff. CNN, TNT Sports, Discovery Channel, HGTV, Food Network, your parents' favorite. We Bought a Cottage in Italy reality shows, plus a bunch of linear cable networks. The logic in that? Well, quarantine the aging, declining cable and news business into one company and make the studio streaming side look shiny and strategic enough to sell for a premium. Spoiler alert, it worked. Yeah, it worked. Once they put out the metaphorical for sale sign on Warner Studio and streaming assets, the sharks showed up. Netflix, the king of streaming. Paramount Skydance, led by David Ellison, desperate to scale up fast. Comcast, NBC Universal wanted a big studio Voltron of NBCU plus Warner. Each had a different approach. Paramount wanted to buy all of WBD, including the linear networks. They even reportedly offered Zaslav a role running the combined giant. Comcast and Netflix were more focused on the studio streaming side, basically what Netflix is now getting. Then it got ugly. Paramount sent a letter to Warner's board accusing them of running a quote-unquote tainted process, claiming conflicts of interest, saying Zaslav had personal interests in post-transaction roles and compensation, and basically implying this: the guy engineered the whole thing to cash out and take care of himself. Warner's board fired back with the classic corporate, "We take our fiduciary duties very seriously." Translation for you in the back: we read the PowerPoint, checked the boxes, and picked the offer with the most zeros. In the end, the board chose Netflix because, well, highest effective value, huge cash component, and a massive breakup fee if regulators nuke the deal. Which brings us to the deal itself. Now let's talk numbers because they're absolutely insane. Netflix is paying, as I mentioned before, $82.7 billion in total enterprise value, around $72 billion in equity, plus Warner's debt to get to that $82.7 billion number. They're offering $27.75 per share for WBD's studio streaming side, which breaks down to roughly $23.25 in cash and $4.50 in Netflix stock. To fund this circus, Netflix is reportedly taking out a $59 billion bridge loan from a syndicate including Wells Fargo, BNP, and HSBC, which is Wall Street speak for, "We're betting the entire company on this, please clap." And to show how serious they are, Netflix agreed to around a $5 billion breakup fee if regulators kill the deal. That's $5 billion. That's not just confidence. That's we're too deep into this to back out without crying money. So what exactly did Netflix buy? Well, only one of the most valuable IP catalogs in entertainment history. Netflix itself is picking up Warner Brothers Motion Picture Group, New Line Cinemas, Warner Brothers Television, DC Studios, James Gunn's entire DCU sandbox, HBO and HBO Max, and Max, the actual HBO brand, plus the streaming service, Warner Brothers Animation and Cartoon Network Studios, Turner Entertainment Library and pre-1986 MGM catalog, and WB Games, the gaming division behind titles like Hogwarts Legacy and more. And of course, the global theatrical distribution system, actual movie theaters, global booking, the whole infrastructure. Netflix, whose co-CEO Ted Sarandos literally said, "Driving folks to a theater is just not our business," now owns a theatrical distribution pipeline. Yeah, can't make that stuff up. The irony is thick enough to cut with a knife. Inside the library, you've got Harry Potter, Wizarding World, Game of Thrones, House of Dragon, Lord of the Rings, WB controlled rights, DC Universe, which is Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, the whole Justice League mess, classic HBO shows like The Sopranos, The Wire, Succession, True Detective, Band of Brothers, sitcom monsters like Friends, The Big Bang Theory, and classic cinema like Casablanca, Citizen Kane, The Wizard of Oz, The Matrix, Mad Max, The Dark Knight, Blade Runner. If you've ever watched something and thought, wow, this looks expensive and was made by adults, chances are it now lives in Netflix's vault. Yeah. Now the juicy fandom bit. We're going to talk about DC. James Gunn has been out here trying to reboot DC from scratch. New Superman, Supergirl, Lanterns, a whole slate designed to finally give DC a coherent cinematic universe. All of that? Well, now sits under Netflix's corporate umbrella. Netflix says they'll maintain Warner Brothers' current operations and build on its strengths, including theatrical releases, which sounds nice, but this is also the company that cancels well-reviewed shows because they didn't pull enough engagement in 28 days and pretended they weren't interested in buying WBD right up until they signed the paperwork. Now, will Gunn's plan survive? Will DC movies still be real theatrical events? Or does everything slowly become Netflix exclusives designed for binge metrics? We'll come back to that in the fan impact segment a little bit later. Remember, Netflix is not buying everything. Before this closes, WBD spins off a separate company called Discovery Global, which will keep CNN, TNT Sports here in the US, like NBA, NHL, March Madness, AEW Wrestling, etc., TBS, TNT, Discovery Channel, HGTV, Food Network, and other cable brands, and some digital pieces like Discovery Plus. So at the end of this, Netflix plus Warner Brothers is the mega studio streamer Voltron, and Discovery Global is basically your parents' cable bundle of news built in 2026. Now, why is Hollywood freaking out? I mean, you drop a bomb like this on Hollywood, and their first reaction is, cool, what happened to my stock, dude? The second reaction is, wait, does Netflix own all of us now? Well, matter of fact, they do. Just saying. An anonymous group of A-list producers sent a letter to Congress calling for maximum antitrust scrutiny. They warned that a combined Netflix plus Warner would hold a noose around the theatrical marketplace. Anonymous, by the way, not because they're shy, but because they're afraid of retaliation. Their words, not out of cowardice, but out of fear, given Netflix's power as a buyer and a distributor. Think about that for a second. Some of the most powerful people in Hollywood are scared to put their names on a letter because Netflix might blacklist them. And now Netflix is trying to get even more powerful. Let's talk about the guilds and the insiders, too. The Directors Guild of America has already announced plans to meet with Netflix about significant concerns. Former Warner Media CEO Jason Killer, said there is no more effective way to reduce competition in Hollywood than this deal. Translation: if you're a director, writer, or actor, this isn't fun synergy. This is one of your biggest potential employers gobbling up another, then deciding whose passion project lives or dies based on time watched per subscriber. Bank of America media analyst Jessica Ehrlich put it bluntly: Netflix is willing to pay for the elimination of a competitor. That's not just analysis, that's the opening slide of an antitrust lawsuit. Because once Netflix swallows Warner Studios and HBO, one of their bigger rivals in high-end scripted content just becomes them. Every other streamer, Disney Plus, Prime Video, Paramount Plus, Peacock, has to negotiate in a world where Netflix controls a gigantic chunk of must-have IP. European exhibitors are calling this the death of Hollywood and saying it fails cinema in every regard. Their fear? Well, Netflix doesn't care much about long theatrical runs. Now they'll control a huge portion of blockbuster-scale franchises, shorter theatrical windows, more straight to streaming, less reliable big-screen content equals cinemas closing, especially outside the US. And frankly, looking at their past behavior with theaters, it's hard to argue that their fear is irrational. Then we got to talk about David Zaslav, the guy who took over WBD, gutted HBO Max's library, canceled projects left and right, tanked the stock from around the mid-20s to under $10 at one point, that's per share, and then restructured his compensation to account for, oh, looky there, a potential sale. Now he's selling the crown jewels for $27.75 a share and walking away looking like a deal maker. In his internal memo to employees, he basically said, "This announcement creates many questions about what's next. Not all answers will be available immediately." Let me translate that for you from corporate speak. I got mine. Good luck, everyone. So this begs the question, does this thing actually go through? I mean, really, does it go through? Because this isn't just raising eyebrows, it's raising bipartisan pitchforks. Republican Congressman Darrell Issa wrote to the Attorney General warning that a Netflix plus HBO Max combo could create a monopoly or could create a company with over 30% of the streaming market, calling that threshold presumptively problematic under antitrust law. He argued it would diminish incentives to produce new content and major theatrical releases. Republican Senator Mike Lee went even further, calling this, and I quote, "perhaps more serious than any transaction I've ever seen in about a decade." But Mike Lee is out here sounding like a film critic. You know, it's pretty wild. And on the other side of the aisle, Senators Elizabeth Warren, Richard Blumenthal, and Bernie Sanders, gotta talk about the millionaires and the billionaires, sent their own letter to the DOJ warning that the deal could be tainted by political favoritism and corruption. So you've got the right screaming market concentration, you've got the left screaming corruption and favoritism, and both parties are agreeing, yeah, this probably isn't great. And in reporting and commentary suggesting Trump's Justice Department is being urged to look at this with maximum skepticism, especially because of Netflix's size and influence, and you've got a political environment that is not merger friendly. This is not 2010 where everything gets rubber stamped. This is tech and media are too big and the voters are mad territory. And even if the U.S. somehow shrugs this thing through, European regulators are notoriously brutal about big media and tech mergers. The UK CMA has a recent history of sending giant deals back to the drawing board. Groups in Europe are already sounding the alarm about theatrical health, market concentration, and local cinema's ecosystems. This isn't one regulator you have to convince, it's several, all with different agendas. So, why is Netflix doing all this? Why? Well, because they think the upside is worth the risk, and they're willing to put around $5 billion on the line as a breakup fee if regulators kill it. Nobody writes a check that big unless, A, they're pretty damn confident, or B, they've decided that even a long shot is worth paying the lawyers for. I mean, realistically, we're looking at least 12 to 18 months of regulatory review, politicians grandstanding on TV, lawyers buying vacation homes off the billable hours, and a non-zero chance that after all that, some regulator slams one big red nope button on that thing. So, what does this deal mean for the fans? Told you I'd get back to that. Let's talk about you, me, the fans. Because at the end of the day, fans care about three things. Where do I watch my favorite stuff? How much is it going to cost me? And are they going to ruin things I actually love? Well, the good news, kind of, is this. This is the first upside. One app, more content. In theory, instead of juggling Netflix and Max, you might eventually have a single super app where you get Stranger Things and Game of Thrones, Squid Game and The Sopranos, Wednesday and the DC movies. Bigger global reach for HBO and WB content. Netflix's recommendation, algo and global scale could surface older HBO, DC, and WB gems for audiences who never had Max or cable. Then you got the theatrical streaming cycle. If Netflix actually keeps WB's theatrical distribution robust, you could see a healthier pipeline of big movies in theaters, Big push on Netflix instead of just stuff evaporating. In the best case scenario, this is less subscription juggling, more stuff in one place. But we don't live in the best case scenario, do we today? No. We live in the timeline where Hollywood keeps speedrunning bad decisions. I mean, think about it. You don't drop over $80 billion on a studio and then say, cool, we're done raising prices forever. So expect higher subscription fees, more aggressive password sharing crackdowns, new Platinum Ultra Prestige 4K DC Wizarding tier nonsense. On top of that, Netflix optimizes for algorithms, not art. Short-term engagement, bingeability, and click-through rates. Now imagine that mentality controlling HBO dramas, DC movies and shows, and WB mid-budget films and weird little passion projects. The fear is that everything gets smoothed out into safe, focus group content designed to keep you scrolling, not to be rewatched 20 years from now. And will HBO still feel like HBO? I mean, does HBO remain a distinct brand inside Netflix? Or do we slowly watch it get absorbed into rows of tiles labeled gritty prestige drama because you watched crime? I mean, HBO has always been about fewer shows, higher budgets, actual quality control. Netflix is about volume, variety, and throw 100 things at the wall and see what sticks. Mash those things together, and you do it wrong, and HBO identity dies a slow content strategy death. And if you're a DC fan, welcome back to the emotional blender. James Gunn plan could get full backing and resources, or it could be slowly bled out if the early films don't hit Netflix's engagement metrics. Netflix could decide superhero fatigue is real and scale back big screen DC, or they could go the other way and crank out cheaper algorithm-friendly spin-offs. We just don't know. But the idea that Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman are at the mercy of a spreadsheet and Los Gatos, yeah, that's a little terrifying. Now, for the short term, expect chaos. Existing licensing deals still have to run out. Some WB and HBO titles will bounce between Netflix, Max remnants, cable, and random third-party streamers. And region by region, things will vanish and reappear like a content shell game. You're going to spend the next couple of years Googling, where's Harry Potter streaming this week? Or, I don't know, where can I find Batman? See what I'm saying? If this deal goes through, Netflix becomes the biggest global streamer, a top-tier Hollywood studio, the owner of some of the most important IP on Earth. Disney, Universal, Paramount, they're all suddenly playing catch-up. The streaming wars as we know them, well, pretty much over. At this point, and that's the part that should really worry fans. Fewer competitors means less pressure to innovate. Less competition for talent means the studios can squeeze creators harder. One company controlling this much content means it sets the rules for licensing, for windows, for what gets made, and what gets buried. Consolidation on this scale almost never benefits the audience long term. It benefits the one giant company that survives. Netflix's track record of canceling beloved shows prematurely, burying movies with zero marketing, chasing short-term engagement over long-term legacy doesn't exactly fill me with confidence that they're the right stewards for a century of cinema history. So that's where we're at. Warner Brothers, the studio that practically built Hollywood, is being sold off to the company that invented binge watching. And are you still watching? Politicians on both sides are sharpening their knives. Hollywood insiders are calling it the death of competition. And we're all just trying to figure out what app we need to watch a Batman movie on in 2 years. So what do you think about the Netflix Warner Brothers deal? Is this the only way WB was ever going to get its act together? Is Netflix the necessary evil that finally stabilizes DC and gives HBO a global megaphone? Or is this just another step toward the future where 3 corporations own everything and we rent our pop culture from them month to month until they decided to delete it for optimization? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'll read as many as I can, and I want to know if you're excited worried, or just completely numb to corporate nonsense at this point. If you've got value out of this breakdown and you're still here, smash that like button so more people can see it. Subscribe to The Critical Nerd if you haven't already, and ring that bell so you don't miss the next chapter, because I'll be covering every twist in this mess, from regulators to DC to what they do with HBO. I'm The Critical Nerd. Thanks for watching. Stay loud, stay skeptical, and I'll see you in the next one. Well, that is assuming Netflix doesn't acquire YouTube before then. Later.